Hello, I'm Rachel Barenbaum, the author of Atomic Anna, and I am so excited to be here today to welcome you to the very first episode of Check This Out at the How Library. That's right. Check these books out. We are a brand new series sponsored by the How Library Corporation. Thank you. Huge thank you. And I am here to bring you books and authors that I think you need to be reading and talking about. My first guest is the unbelievable Jonathan Escoffery. Hello, Jonathan. Welcome.
Hello. Very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. So this is your debut, If I Survive You. And this book is unbelievable. To say that you've been getting attention and press and praise is understatement. Right? You are already longlisted for the National Book Award among many, many prestigious honors and shout outs. Congratulations. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you so much. It's a little bit of a dream come true, staying humble, staying grounded though. We're
like full spread in the New York Times, photo shoot and everything. New Yorker, you are everywhere.
I'm a few places. Yeah.
It's amazing and so well deserved. So for those of you that don't know Jonathan, I'm going to read his bio quickly just to give you a sense of what he's been doing before he's taken over the literary world here. So Jonathan Escoffery is the recipient of the 2020 Plimpton Prize for Fiction, a 2020 NEA Literature Fellowship, and the 2020 ASME Award for Fiction. His fiction has appeared in the Paris Review, American Short Fiction, Prairie Schooner, Agni, Passages North, Zizava, and Electric Literature. We're still going. Hang on. He is a fellow in the University of Southern California's PhD in Creative Writing and Literature program. And in 2021, he was awarded a Wallace Stegner Fellowship from Stanford. He was born and raised in Miami, Florida, and I know him, of course, from Grub Street in Boston. And we go way back to the days when we were walking the halls, hoping one day we would publish books. And here
absolutely.
He is. Here he is.
Yep, absolutely. We were staring at the author saying, I want to be you one day. And here we are. We are yes. The published authors now.
Yes, we were. So I'm so excited about this book. Can you tell us what is this beautiful book about?
Well, it's about a family of Jamaicans who moved from Kingston to Miami in the late 1970s. And the reason that they moved is that there was a lot of, in reality, political turmoil and a lot of violence spilling out into the streets in Jamaica. So for the safety of the family, the two parents, Topper and Sonia, decide to move their infant son, Delano, to Miami. And it's in Miami that they have their second son, who's named Trelawney. And it happens that Trelawney kind of gets the most page space and attention in the book because he is on this journey to figure out who he's going to be in the world and, whether or not he is American enough or Jamaican enough or how he can find belonging and love both within the family and out in the outside world.
Yeah.
We follow him on a lot of really odd jobs that he does. And that was a lot of fun to write about as well.
It's a lot of fun to read about too. So this is described as, I guess, a novel in short stories. And I have to say, I hear that description a lot, but it actually, the first time it ever made sense was your book. It wasn't like you were actually just trying to string together random stories. This is actually, short stories, but sort of scenes from a family is more how I read the book.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I set out to, at one point, write a novel, and I wanted the novel to have standalone chapters that I could publish in the Paris Review and places like that. And then once I realized I had a bunch of stories, the novel idea that I had wasn't exactly working. So it was when I just looked up and said, hey, you've got a bunch of stories about the same family, about the same kind of conflicts. I decided to put it all back together again. And that's how it kind of took shape in the way that it does and did. And I matched my book, so I thought it was important that I hold it up myself, which I only halfway meant to do.
I mean, I think it was brilliant. You should always match your book cover. So I was wondering if you could turn to the opening page and just read that very first paragraph for us so we could hear your voice. You start with, "It begins."
It begins with, "What are you?" Hollered from the perimeter of your front yard when you're 9, younger probably. You'll be asked again throughout junior high and high school, then out in the world, in strip clubs, in food courts, over the phone and at various menial jobs. The askers are expectant. They demand immediate gratification. Their question lifts you slightly off your pre-adolescent toes, tilting you, not just because you don't understand it, but because even if you did understand this question, you wouldn't yet have an answer.
Thank you. I loved this opening. I thought this was unbelievable. This question, what are you? Right? Stuck with me through the whole book. Felt like that was the book. That was the theme. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, it's a question that Trelawney is kind of assaulted with from the early age of 9, where people are having this response where they want to be able to put him in one box or another that might make them feel comfortable in their interactions with him, I think. At least that's how I've come to understand this kind of phenomenon. I'm calling in from Miami today, where I don't live, but I'm visiting my family. And growing up in Miami, it's a question I got asked a lot. And I might say, well, I was born in the US, so I guess what I am is American. And they would shake their heads and they'd say, no, stupid, like, where are your parents from? And I'd say, well, let me just alter this answer and say, well, I'm Jamaican. And they say, no, stupid, you don't sound Jamaican. You can't be Jamaican, or you don't look like the Jamaicans I imagine. And actually, you might look more like these people on this other island, a couple islands over from Jamaica. And so I wanted to, I'd never read about that experience, even though I'd had that experience growing up. And so I wanted to kind of explore that in the prose.
Yeah. I mean, and that's exactly what your characters do, right? I mean, it is sort of a search for, sort of identity in its truest sense, right? In the book and that question, but it's a violent question in a way,
it is.
Right? To ask someone, it's aggressive in a way that maybe people don't understand. I think you talk about that in the book, right?
Right. Yeah. I think people think that they're owed an answer, first of all. And then it goes beyond just that assumption that they can get the answer from you at any time in any given context. And then they can simultaneously deny you whatever if you go so far as to answer the question, they can also deny you whatever your answer is. And so it's a confusing thing for Trelawney, and he searches out the answer thinking that he can be settled in one answer, hopefully, so he can be, in a sense, settled in his own body and in a sense find a kind of belonging or even safety at times, because it's a book about Miami, as much as it is about, this immigrant family. And Miami is a very multicultural place, and people often want to know how they're supposed to relate to you based on exactly what culture it is that you're taking part in. And for him, he can't quite find the solid grounds that might allow for, I guess, a simpler experience as he moves throughout the world. And it's really the world of Miami.
Yeah. Yeah. And the person asking is really uncomfortable until they get that answer, right?
Exactly. Right. I think there's a lot of truth to that. And, sometimes I think, well, that's a memory I've had from growing up in Miami. And then I'll be in Miami for a week and I'll be asked that question. What are you? And it's like, are we really 2022? Really? We're still doing that?
Right.
Yes. And so, and people are trying to find, how to, because I mean, the truth of the matter is Miami is this beautiful, visually gorgeous landscape, and it's beautiful because we have all of these cultures. There are at times where, some ethnicities feel very comfortable interacting with others, and then there may be certain groups that historically have not gotten along, and they want to know, can you get along with? If they see you, they want to know, can I get along with you? And it doesn't matter who you are as a person, as a fully realized adult moving through the world who has your own set of values. They want to know, but where are your people from? And can I get along with you based on that?
Yeah, I love that. And then I was also taken sort of midway through the book, Trelawney's saying, he's dealing with this question, and then he's walking around, he's in Miami Beach, and there's a sentence you say, more often they drunkenly slur, "What are you?" To which the hostesses smile and name their country of origin. And then you wrote, "These dickheads are just that for asking, but I linger when they do because I also want to know."
Right. Absolutely. I mean, it's something that he internalizes for himself in a sense. People are kind of obsessed with knowing that question, "What are you?" And he, at a certain point, at a certain age, once he's actually able to have more agency as a young adult and then just as an adult, that question kind of lingers with him. And so he's searching for it in himself, but then he starts to, in a sense, even look for that in other people. And something that I talk about is the fact that he has this kind of, he's Black in America, but he also has this multi-generationally mixed heritage as well. And so that also sets him up to be identified in different ways, or misidentified, or people approach him with that same kind of curiosity. And so when he sees other mixed people, he starts to be a little bit interested in the, what answers they might be able to provide, and so I love him because he's such a flawed character who sometimes internalizes things that he shouldn't. Or he might, maybe not, maybe shouldn't.
Right. But I mean, at this point in his life, this is actually segueing perfectly into what I'd love to ask you about next, which is he really talks about these two dreams that he has. So the first one is, right, he wants to go to college and he wants to get a job, right, and find his ticket to this life. So he goes to college, but then he can't get a job, and he can't, right, he's living in his car for a while. And I would love to hear you talk about that. I mean, I think it's brave to talk about, homelessness. And you have this one sentence where he says, "The best thing about a job is having a toilet on which to sit and unload your twisted, clogged up colon without having to fake like you're planning to buy the double McFuckery with fries."
Right.
I love that sentence because, you think about, oh, well, people who are, who don't have a home, maybe they're hungry or cold or whatever, but you don't talk about the toilet, right? Needing a place to go to the bathroom.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, a line like that comes from, well, just for people who haven't read the book, we were talking earlier about his search for belonging, his search for finding his identity. And it's at the time where he decides that he's going to reclaim his Jamaicanness, his Jamaican identity, that he has this falling out with his father, because his father kind of denies him of his proper Jamaicanness. His father calls him a tourist for having just visited the island over the course of a summer. And this falling out happens at the time where Trelawney has come back home from college, thinking that because he's got a bachelor's degree in English literature, that's going to basically reward him with a job. And unfortunately for him, it happens at the time of the 2008 recession. And he's not able to find that job very quickly. And his father puts him out of the house. So he's living out of his SUV. And he winds up applying for a job at a government subsidized elderly housing community. And that's where he's making this statement about, he's finally found a job again, and he's not housed yet. He's still living out of his car, but at least now he has a toilet that he can use. And I mean, that line was kind of inspired by, a time where I was working multiple jobs and trying to finish college. And I was often, working so much that I wouldn't necessarily see home for days, because I had to get from work to school, back to work. And there was no way I was actually going to make it home. And I'd have to, try to catch a nap either on a college bench or in my car in the 95-degree heat. And if it was college, it was okay. I might just take a shower at the fitness center. But if I were away from campus, often I'd find myself, especially like working out on the beach, if I couldn't get to work first, you can't get into these restrooms unless you're a paying customer, and thinking about how I'd be, stuck out without being able to do different things like take a shower or use the bathroom, and the, the various indignities that being in that position kind of puts you in. And, you know, and so having that kind of access was, I mean, it's something I thought a lot about in a sense. And so I have Trelawney considering, you know, such a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was very real. And I hadn't read someone bringing that to life in that way before, right? It's those small details that make it real and so compelling. And I think that's what people are responding to, because that's throughout the book. You really did a fantastic job. But you talk about, right, he ends up in this position because he has a falling out with his father. So I want to go to one of the big themes of this book, which is fatherhood. Right.
Absolutely.
And you have, again, one of my favorite sentences here. I'm probably going to sound terrible when I read this, but it goes, every boy deserves to believe him father is good. But if each father were good, we'd be living in a different kind of world. You see me? And then you wrote, what kind of man abandons his son?
Mm-hmm.
And so fatherhood as a theme, can you talk about, you know, how you were thinking about it and its role in the book?
Yeah, I absolutely was thinking about fathers and the roles that they play in their children's lives, and different kinds of fathers. You have the fathers like that line that you just read is from a story called Splashdown, and that's featuring one of we've been talking about Trelawney, and this is Trelawney's cousin now, Cookie, who's dealing with the problems that he's having with his father. He was abandoned by his father from birth, more or less, and he meets him for the first time in the Florida Keys when in the summer he turns 13. And so to me, there was that kind of scale of the father who abandons his child, you know, and what you know, what's behind such a thing, and can you ever come back from such a betrayal? From looking at it from the son's point of view, is there any way you could possibly rebuild trust? And then I wanted to look at it from, you know, a father more like Trelawney's, who wasn't the most present. He was often, you know, he would go missing on weekends and at nights, and you know, the poor mother Sonia would have to pull out the address book, because this is 1980s, and you know, and call people and say, you know, has he died out on the street? Is he just drunk at a party somewhere? And the kids would have to get involved as well. And so I wanted to look at these, explore if there's any way to repair these kinds of relationships, because it's just something I'm personally interested in, how fathers can do better, or in the cases where they aren't going to do better, like what gets passed down. Because sometimes, you know, I'm not a father, but I am interested in that kind of question, that the children of parents who maybe didn't do the best job based on the child's perspective, like how they imagine they're going to grow up and be better and undo the harm when they become parents. And, you know, I look at a Delano character, and, you know, he's making mistakes as well, although he at least is imagining that he, you know, if he can get his finances back on track, that then he'll be able to get his boys back into his life. And so I guess I'm interested in kind of multi-generational lessons that are taught, both the good ones and the bad ones, and kind of unpacking those things and figuring out, you know, what works and what might not work so well.
Yeah. But Delano, like Tawny, all of them, they keep thinking, if only I can do this, everything will be fine. If only I can do that.
Right.
But it doesn't quite work that way.
It never does. I mean, I think maybe this is my worldview coming out on the page, but I wanted the book to have this kind of balance between the things that we can control and the things that we can't. And I wanted my characters to have a lot of agency, but also show that they are, you know, people often make like the hurricane analogy or metaphor, because there are literally a lot of hurricanes that are either they're aimed at Miami, or they're literally destroying Miami in this book. And these characters are at times they're trying to make the best decisions they can when, despite being in, you know, really bad situations that they didn't necessarily create for themselves. But what we also find with a character like Delano and Trelawney is that sometimes they're making decisions that are actually making their bigger set of circumstances actually much worse than they started out. And so I wanted to make them human feeling. So I wanted them to also be flawed and have control of, of the mistakes, own their mistakes in a sense.
Yeah, I love it. So I want to talk about hurricanes, of course, but in a minute, because first I just want to give you a huge shout out, because I don't know if you guys that are listening realize that I gave him 2 sentences, right? And Jonathan pulled out the story, the characters, right? He knew exactly where I was in this book. And I think a lot of people make a mistake of thinking it's an overnight success, this book, like boom, all of a sudden he's bestseller and, National Book Award nominee, all this. But I mean, you must have been through these pages, right? Like every author, 5,000 times each.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
That you could,
yeah. I was working on this book for years and years and years. And every time I'm on a panel with a novel, and I'm sorry, I'm not coming for the novelist, trust me, but sometimes there'll be a novelist who will say, a novel's different because with a story, you just kind of write it and then you put it out and you forget about it. And, as though you're just going to write a story in 2 weeks and then get it published a day later. And for me, I've worked on these stories for years and years. People were born during the writing of these stories. People have died during the writing of these stories. And so I spent a lot of time on this book, and it's been a long, long journey.
Yeah, amazing and worth it. I think totally worth it. But
Absolutely.
Give you one sentence and you know where you are. That was unbelievable.
Thank you.
All right. So I do want to move to the hurricanes. I thought that one of you can tell I'm a fan of pulling out quotes and pieces of the book, right? Because I just love the writing so much. But one of my favorite descriptions that you wrote in here was about the hurricane and the aftermath of the hurricane. I'm sure you'll know where I am in the book as I read this to you. But you wrote, just to give our listeners, a sense of the beauty of the description and the language that you use here. What the archived pictures can't convey is that a decomposing palm tree, one that's been ripped from the earth and left in the road to die, smells as pitiful as a rotting human, or that even the inanimate innards of houses stink of loss, of soaked through death post-storm, and after a day or so, this rot stifled not just Cutler Ridge, but most of Miami.
Yes. From pestilence.
So can you talk about the theme of storms? Because of course we have 2 big ones in here.
Yeah, growing up in Miami, I was talking to owner of a bookstore down here, Mitchell Kaplan, a few days ago. And, it's if you were here in Miami during before 1992, you would have known about Hurricane Andrew and maybe lived through and experienced Hurricane Andrew. And it was such a devastating thing in the lives of people from Miami, especially people along the coast and in the, I'll say South Dade County. And it's this, I at one point, Delano calls it the Christ event. It's the marker for before and after for residents of Miami. And I didn't think I could write about Miami without having mention of Hurricane Andrew and hurricanes in general, and how your life can be one thing one day, and then just depending on the storm that hits, one such as a category 4 or 5, it can change everything. It could destroy everything you have. And so that's what happens to this family. That's what happened to my family. And for me, it was the event that kind of ended my childhood in a sense, but it's something that Trelawney is looking at as in multiple stories, and Delano as well. They're looking back on this moment that, in a sense, like they had this kind of happy-ish, adventure-ish experience in their neighborhood, where they were kind of fighting off these neighborhood animals, and they were dealing with nature. There's at one point, crabs are coming through in the thousands, and they're collecting crabs with their mom's mopping pail, and they're dealing with millipedes and these birds, these nighthawks that are attacking them as they try to walk the dog around the block. And then it's this final kind of act of nature, in a sense, that they can't fight. They can kind of run from and hide from, but they can't fight. And it changes everything in their lives. I think especially for Trelawney, in a sense. And I wanted that kind of that sense that, no matter what decisions you're making, there always might be this thing that's looming, that could strike, maybe not at any time with a hurricane, but it could kind of, it could form quickly enough and change the course of your life. And, again, that's a worldview of somebody who actually lived through such an event. But I thought it was important to have that on the page.
Yeah. I mean, I think it did end the childhood for your characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it also created opportunity for someone like Topper, because Topper's business, as someone who's in construction, right. It takes off because now houses have to be rebuilt. And we see Delano try to, in a sense, replicate that when Hurricane Irene is coming from Miami, right. And he's trying to get his tree service back on track. And he's going to convince this property owner to give him a job right before the hurricane hits. And we see things kind of go a different way for him.
Yeah. I love it. All right. So I'd like to shift gears for the last few minutes here and just ask you, what was the hardest part about getting this book published and getting your stories published?
I got in my head a lot about that question of, is this going to be a novel? Is this going to be a story collection, like stories, novel and stories? What are we going to call it? The thing that is a challenge, I think, when you're writing a book like this is, okay, I write the first story in flux, not necessarily in that order, but I have in flux. The second story now, what am I world building from scratch again? Am I assuming that somebody read Influx before they get to Under the Ackee Tree, the second story? And that was really mentally taxing. And I think I had to, in a sense, just write the best stories I could, put them together, and then go through and go through with my agent and go through with my editor at FSG and my editor at Fourth Estate, and come to decisions in a sense. And people still might think, oh, well, that could have come out, or maybe you could have reminded us of this thing. But I think trying to solve that puzzle, it was kind of like a Rubik's Cube, because every time I put something in, something else had to shift or come out. Every time something came out, something had to go back in another place. And that was a really big challenge for me. Yeah.
Well, it came out beautifully. It worked in the end.
Thanks.
And so my last question, listeners are often writers, aspiring writers. What kind of advice do you have for people who may be just starting out or who are well into their journey?
I think, keep reading a lot. If you can,
yes.
If you can read before, so writer's block, I find it happens the most for me when I'm facing a blank page. I like to write in the morning these days. So if I know in the morning there's a blank page that I have to be facing, that's a terrifying prospect. And so I like to do two things. If I read before bed, oftentimes I'm reminding myself, even in my dreams, that literature is important and that taking part in literature is important. And then I tend to wake up in a better space to go ahead and attack the page. Another thing I like to do is actually, because I'm always clipping things out of my stories, I don't delete them. I put them in another file on my computer. And sometimes there'll be, let's say, an interesting character who didn't quite make the cut for one story. I might go back and really re-explore that character in another story. And sometimes just that idea that, I'm taking something I already have and moving forward with that. It's easier to imagine doing that.
I love that. Like, you don't know what kind of gems you still have in there, right?
Exactly.
Could come out.
Right.
So for people who love this book, which will probably be everyone who reads it, do you want to talk about what's coming next?
Yeah, well, I'm working on a novel. It also is set in Miami. There are also Jamaican American characters in it.
Good, we want more.
Yeah. And so I think that's all I'll say for it right now. But I constantly write stories in my head and on my phone, and so I hope to be continuing to put some of those out as well.
Right, like writing is not just when you're sitting down in front of your computer and typing.
Exactly.
Right? It's like anytime you're doing something, you might get an idea or something.
Exactly. I'm walking around bumping into things because I'm writing in my head.
I love that. All right. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us here on the very first episode of Check This Out at the Howe Library. I absolutely love your book, If I Survive You. Good luck. I hope you win the National Book Award and everything else that you're up for. I absolutely think this is just a gorgeous, gorgeous collection. Everyone should read it. You should check it out of your local library or the Howe Library, or go buy it at your local bookstore. May you sell many, many copies. Coming up
Thank
next
you.
in this, you are welcome. Coming up next in this series on October 12th, we have Kelly Ford and her amazing book, Real Bad Things. Yes, this book was so good. It also just came out, so you can check that out at the Howe Library or buy a copy at your local bookstore. Listeners, we just want to thank the Howe Library Corporation one more time. I will see you again on October 12th. Jonathan, thank you. Big shout out to our producers today, Megan Coleman and Jared Jenish. They did an amazing job. Thank you to Ruby Simon, the library director. Join us next time. Thank you so much.